Hello there, welcome to HFY Sci-Fi Galaxy, where humans face the unknown, outsmart the impossible, and turn every test into victory. So sit back and let the story begin.
Nobody noticed the human. That was fine with Nora Hadley. She had spent most of her 28 years being overlooked, and she had learned long ago that invisible people lived longer. So when she guided her beat-up cargo shuttle into docking Bay 9 of Pale Drift Station, she kept her head low, signed the permits without small talk, and started unloading crates of mineral cores by hand. The station was a mid-rim trading hub, a spinning ring of metal and glass orbiting a fat orange gas giant. Thousands of aliens passed through every cycle. Grethians, slow and slug-like, ran the administration. Delvari, tall and blue-skinned with four graceful arms, handled the medical ward. Toro merchants, armored like beetles, haggled in the market halls. Fen, small and fox-faced, darted between the crowds doing odd jobs nobody else wanted. Humans were rare out here. Most species had heard of them, but never met one. The general opinion was that they were soft, emotional, and tragically short-lived. A minor species from an unremarkable yellow star. Hardly worth cataloging. Station Overseer Palam, a Grethian so large he filled his entire office like a gray puddle, had stamped Nora's docking permit without even looking up. One human, one small ship, one routine delivery. Nothing worth his attention. Nora preferred it that way. She worked through the next several hours moving crates from her shuttle to the station's storage grid. Each crate weighed roughly 80 kilograms. The station provided hover trolleys for this purpose. Nora used her arms. It was faster, and she did not like waiting for equipment. Ren, a Delvory medic on his way to the lower labs, stopped in the corridor and watched her carry a crate past him. His four arms hung loose at his sides. His pale blue skin shifted slightly toward gray, which among his kind was a sign of confusion. He had treated humans once before, a trader with a broken wrist. He remembered being surprised at the density of human bone. Now, watching this small female carry what should have been an impossible load with nothing more than a slight lean to compensate, he felt that surprise return. He pulled up his medical scanner and took a passive reading as she passed. The results made him blink all three of his eyes at once. Muscle density far beyond her frame. Bone reinforcement that looked almost engineered but was entirely natural. An adrenal system that seemed designed for repeated crisis response. A cardiovascular setup built for sustained output over hours, not minutes. Ren returned to his quarters that evening and opened the Galactic Species Index. He searched for Earth. He had never read the full entry before. Most people did not bother. Humans were not considered important enough. He read it now. Class 12 Deathworld. That stopped him. The classification scale only went to 15, and anything above 10 was considered hostile to all known life. Earth sat at 12. The entry described a world of extreme weather, tectonic instability, atmospheric unpredictability, and a biosphere where nearly everything was either a predator, a parasite, or both. The dominant species had clawed its way to the top, not through natural weapons or armor, but through endurance, cooperation, and the ability to keep functioning long after any reasonable organism would have stopped. Ren set the tablet down and stared at the wall for a while. Meanwhile, Nora had found something in Cargo Bay 12. She had gone there to check the seals on her last shipment when she heard a sound. It was faint, a tiny whimper from behind a stack of shipping containers. She moved quietly, not out of caution, but out of habit. On the colony world where she had grown up, loud movements attracted things with teeth. Behind the containers, curled into a ball inside a torn shipping blanket, was a Fen child. She was small even by Fen standards, with matted copper fur and ears pressed flat against her skull. Her eyes were huge and wet and terrified. Nora crouched down slowly. She did not speak. She did not reach out. She simply sat on the cold metal floor about 2 meters away and pulled a ration bar from her jacket pocket. She broke it in half, set one piece on the ground between them, and began eating the other half herself. For a long time, nothing happened. The Fen child watched her with those enormous eyes. Nora chewed her ration bar and looked at nothing in particular. Then, very slowly, a small furry hand reached out and took the food. Nora learned later that her name was DRI. She was an orphan. Her parents had been killed in a raid on a transport ship 4 months ago. She had been passed between stations ever since, falling through the cracks of systems that were not designed to catch anyone, least of all a Finn child with no family and no value. Nora did not say much to DRI that first night. She did not need to. She just sat with her until the child's breathing slowed and her eyes closed and her small body relaxed into something that might have been the first real sleep she had gotten in months. Then Nora took off her own jacket, draped it over the sleeping child, and sat with her back against the container wall, keeping watch. She did not think of it as anything special. Where she came from, you did not leave small things alone in the dark. That was not bravery. That was just what you did. 3 decks above, Rin finished reading the final line of the human species entry. It said, "Despite their physical capabilities, humans are most notable for their tendency to form protective bonds with non-related species. The evolutionary basis for this behavior remains unexplained." He closed the tablet and thought about the woman carrying impossible weight through the corridors of pale drift, and wondered what else about her he had failed to notice. The child followed her everywhere. Nora had not asked for a shadow. She had not planned on staying at Pale Drift longer than 2 days. But her ship needed a fuel cell replacement, and the station supply drones were running behind schedule, so she was stuck. And wherever she went, DRI went too. The little Finn moved like smoke, silent and quick, always 3 steps behind Nora. If Nora stopped, DRI stopped. If Nora sat, DRI sat next to her, close enough to touch but never quite touching. It was the behavior of a creature that had learned the hard way not to trust, but was trying anyway. Nora did not mind. She had grown up around animals on the colony world of dust, creatures that would bite your hand off one day and sleep curled against your chest the next. You earned trust slowly, with patience and consistency. You did not force it. So she fed DRI. She found better food than ration bars, trading a few spare parts for fresh fruit paste and grain cake from a Delvari vendor who looked at her strangely, but took the deal. She fashioned a proper blanket from clean packing material and found an unused storage closet near her docking bay where DRI could sleep without being disturbed. She taught DRI a hand-clapping game. It was something her mother had taught her when she was small, back on Dust, during the long nights when the wind outside sounded like screaming. It was a silly thing, just rhythms and patterns, but DRI picked it up fast, and for the first time since Nora had found her, the child made a sound that was not fear. She laughed. It was a small, rusty sound, like a machine that had not been used in a long time. Nora smiled. She did not smile often. It changed her whole face. The other station residents noticed the strange arrangement. A few Delvari workers watched from a distance, their translucent skin shifting colors with curiosity. A group of Toru merchants clicked their mandibles in what passed for amusement. A human bonding with a Fen orphan. How odd. How pointless. The Fen were not a respected species. They were small, weak, and scattered across the galaxy in tiny communities that never seemed to grow. Orphan Fen children were technically the responsibility of whatever station they ended up on, but in practice, they were ignored until they either found work or disappeared. Nobody invested resources in them. It was considered wasteful. Nora did not care what was considered wasteful. Ren found her on the second day, sitting in a market hall with DRI on her lap, braiding the child's matted fur with careful fingers. He sat down across from her, folding his 4 arms in the Delvari posture of respectful approach. "I read about your world," he said. "Most people do." "Eventually," Nora replied without looking up. "It said your gravity is nearly twice what most species evolve in. Feels normal to me." Ren watched her fingers work through the tangles in DRI's fur. The child was completely relaxed, eyes half closed, leaning into Nora's warmth. "What was it like?" he asked. "Growing up there." Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The colony was called Dust. The air was thin. The ground shook every few days. There were storms that could peel metal off a roof if you did not bolt it down right. And there were things in the hills that hunted at night. Big things. Fast things." She said it the way someone might describe a slightly inconvenient commute. Ren's skin turned a shade of pale violet, which was the Delvari equivalent of horror. How did you survive? You learn, Nora said simply. You learn what sounds mean danger. You learn to sleep light. You learn that if something is chasing you, you do not have to be faster than it. You just have to keep running longer than it can. Ren stared at her. On his world, the most dangerous predator was a slow-moving filter feeder. The idea of a childhood spent outrunning apex predators was beyond his ability to fully process. Across the market hall, a large Toru merchant named Galek watched the human with a different kind of interest. Galek was broad even by Toru's standards, his shell scarred and dark. He had been on Pale Drift for 2 weeks, longer than any legitimate trade required. He had a reason for staying. That reason was currently docked in Bay 3. 40 mineral core crates, fresh from the outer colonies, worth enough to fund a small war. And Galek had already told someone exactly where to find them. He had sent the message 3 days ago, using a hidden transmitter buried in his cargo. A tight beam signal aimed at a very specific set of coordinates where a very specific ship was waiting. The message was simple, target rich, security minimal, come when ready. The ship belonged to a Korath raider named Sava. Galek looked at the human one more time. She was small, quiet, unarmed. She was sitting on the floor playing with a child. He had raided enough stations to know what threats looked like, and this woman was not one. He turned away and continued waiting. 3 decks up, Overseer Palom noticed another anomaly on the long-range sensors. A faint energy signature, moving closer. He considered flagging it for review. Then he looked at the stack of trade permits on his desk and decided it could wait. It could always wait. In the storage closet near Bay 9, DRI slept soundly for the 2nd night in a row, wrapped in a packing material blanket with the sound of Nora's steady breathing nearby. She did not know that she was safe, but her body knew. And for now, that was enough. The lights died first. One moment the corridors of Pale Drift hummed with the steady glow of standard station lighting. The next, everything went black. Not a flicker, not a fade. Just darkness, sudden and total, like a hand closing over the station's eyes. Then came a sound, a deep, resonant boom that traveled through the metal bones of the station like a heartbeat. Then another, then a third from a different direction. Breach charges. 3 of them. 3 docking ports hit at the same time. Nora was in the lower cargo bay when it happened. She had just finished checking seal integrity on a crate when the floor shuddered beneath her feet and the emergency lights snapped on, painting everything in dull red. She felt the pressure change before the alarm started. A subtle shift in the air, the kind of thing most species would not notice. But Nora had grown up in thin atmosphere. She noticed. Her body responded before her mind finished processing. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. Her pupils widened to pull in every scrap of light from the dim emergency strips. Every muscle in her body went from resting to ready in the space of a single breath. She did not panic. She had never panicked. Panic was a luxury for species that had not evolved on worlds where hesitation meant death. DRI was beside her, the little Finn child frozen in place, her enormous eyes reflecting the red emergency glow. Her ears were flat against her skull, and her whole body was trembling. Nora knelt down, put both hands on DRI's shoulders, and spoke in a voice that was calm and clear and left no room for argument. Listen to me. There is a sealed crate behind you, the blue one with the broken latch. You're going to climb inside it. You're going to close the lid. You're not going to make a sound. You're not going to come out until you hear me say the word sunrise. Do you understand? DRI nodded, her small body still shaking. Say it back to me. Sunrise, DRI whispered. Good girl. Go now. DRI went. She slipped into the crate like water and pulled the lid down. Nora heard the faint click of the latch and allowed herself 1 second to make sure no sound came from inside. Then she turned toward the corridor and began to move. Above her, the station was falling apart. Sava's raiders had done this before. The Korath captain ran her crew with brutal efficiency. Cut communications first, so no distress signal could reach the sector patrol. Kill external power, so the station's defenses went offline. Breach multiple points simultaneously, so security could not concentrate forces. Then sweep inward, fast and hard, herding everyone toward the center like prey into a trap. It worked. It always worked. Pale Drift's security force consisted of 4 Grethian guards armed with low-grade stun batons. They were trained for breaking up trade disputes, not repelling boarding parties. The raiders cut through them in minutes. 2 were stunned and bound. 1 managed to seal himself in a maintenance closet. The 4th tried to fight and was put down with a plasma bolt that left a black mark on the corridor wall where he had been standing. Within 20 minutes, the raiders had control of the station's central market hall. They herded the residents inside, hundreds of them, Delvari, Grethians to Finn, a scattering of other species. All of them frightened, all of them compliant. Sava walked among them like she owned the place, which for the moment, she did. She was tall for a Korath, covered in dark green scales, with a jaw that could crush metal pipe and eyes that reflected light like polished stone. She wore scarred armor and carried a heavy plasma rifle with the casual ease of someone who had used it many times. She made her announcement in a voice that carried without effort. This station is under our control. Cooperate, and we will take what we came for and leave. Resist, and I will open every airlock on this ring and let the void sort you out. Nobody resisted. Nobody even moved. Overseer Palom, pressed against a wall in the back of the hall, had turned a shade of gray that was almost white. His administrative mind was cycling through protocols, none of which covered this situation. He had ignored the sensor anomalies. He had ignored the warnings. And now 40 armed raiders stood between him and everything he had been responsible for. Ren was trapped in the medical bay. The raiders had sealed the section doors during their sweep, but had not bothered to clear the lower decks fully. Medical bays held nothing worth stealing. He pressed his back against the wall and listened to heavy footsteps pass outside, dragging people toward the market hall. He thought of Nora. Small, quiet, unarmed Nora, somewhere in the lower levels. He hoped she had found somewhere to hide. He hoped she was safe. He did not yet understand that safety was not what Nora was looking for. In the lower cargo bay, Nora moved through the red-lit corridors like something that had been built for exactly this. The air was getting thinner as the environmental systems failed. The temperature was dropping. Frost was beginning to form on exposed pipes. She found a wall-mounted maintenance panel and pulled it open. Inside was a basic station schematic on a faded plastic sheet. She studied it for 10 seconds, memorizing the layout of ventilation shafts, maintenance corridors, and emergency access points. Then she pulled a metal pipe free from a wall bracket, tested its weight and balance in her hands, and started climbing. Above her, 40 raiders controlled a station of over 1,000 souls. They had weapons, armor, numbers, and a captain who had never lost a raid. Below them, in the dark, a single human was moving, and she was not hiding. She was hunting. The ventilation shaft was not designed for a person to crawl through. It was narrow, pitch dark, and the metal walls were so cold they burned bare skin on contact. Ice crystals hung from the joints where sections connected, and the air that moved through it was thin enough to make breathing feel like sucking through a cloth. Nora moved through it without slowing down. On the colony world of dust, children played in caves where the air was thinner than this. They climbed rock faces in windstorms for fun. They held breath-holding competitions in the shallow sulfur pools behind the settlement, seeing who could stay under the longest before the sting became too much. Nora had won those competitions every single time, not because her lungs were bigger, but because she had learned early that the body could go further than the mind believed. You just had to convince yourself that the pain was not important. She dropped out of the shaft into a maintenance corridor on Deck 4. The emergency lights here were failing, blinking on and off in a stuttering rhythm that would have been disorienting for most species. Nora's eyes adjusted within seconds. Humans were not built for darkness the way some species were, but they were built for adaptation. Her brain filtered the flickering, filled in the gaps, and gave her a functional picture of the corridor ahead. 3 raiders stood at the far end. They were Korath, like their captain. 2 males and a female, all scaled, all armed. They had been posted to guard this section while the main force held the market hall. It was boring duty. Nothing down here but empty corridors and broken environmental systems. The female was leaning against the wall. One of the males was checking his weapon. The other was eating something from a pouch. They saw Nora step out of the maintenance hatch. For a moment, nobody moved. The raiders looked at her with the dull curiosity of predators examining something unfamiliar. She was small. She was unarmed, except for a metal pipe. She was human, a species most of them had never encountered. One of them made a sound that Nora recognized as laughter, a low clicking from deep in the throat. The one who was eating put his food away. The female straightened up. They did not raise their weapons fully. Why would they? She was one small creature with a pipe. Nora did not give them time to reconsider. She moved faster than any of them expected. Humans are endurance predators, built to run for hours, but in short bursts, they can produce explosive speed that catches faster species completely off guard. Nora closed the distance to the first raider in 2 steps and drove the pipe into the soft joint beneath his jaw where the scales did not cover. He went down choking. The second raider raised his weapon. Nora was already inside his reach. She hooked the pipe behind his knee and pulled. He fell hard, and she brought the pipe down on his wrist. The weapon clattered away. A second strike to the side of his head ended the fight. The female was faster than the other two. She got her weapon up and fired. The bolt scorched the wall where Nora had been standing a half-second earlier. Nora had read the shot before it came, watching the raider's shoulder tension, the angle of the barrel, the shift in weight. Pattern recognition. The thing that had made humans the most dangerous creatures on a world full of dangerous creatures. She could read body language across species lines because the physics of movement were universal. She sidestepped the second shot, closed in, and hit the female once across the forearm, breaking her grip on the weapon, then once across the temple. The raider dropped. 8 seconds. 3 raiders. Nora stood over them, breathing slightly elevated but controlled. Her hands were steady. Her expression had not changed. She checked their weapons. Too heavy, too long, designed for Korath hands with different joint structures. She kept the pipe. She moved on. 2 decks up, she found a sealed section door with voices behind it. Station workers, trapped when the raiders locked the section doors during the sweep. She found a manual release panel, a simple mechanical backup that the raiders had not thought to disable, and forced it open. 11 people stumbled out. 8 Delvari, 2 Grethians, and Ren. The medic stared at her. She was covered in frost from the ventilation shafts. There was a thin cut across her forearm from a sharp metal edge somewhere in the ducts. She was holding a dented pipe, and her eyes were the calmest thing on the station. "Are you hurt?" she asked him. He almost laughed. "Are you?" "No." "How many raiders did you count during the sweep?" "I saw at least 15 past the medical bay." "Maybe more." Nora nodded. She turned to the group. They were frightened, shivering, looking at her like she was something they did not have a word for. She spoke to each of them in turn, her voice low and even. "You," she said to a large Grethian. "You know the station layout. Find every manual door release between here and the power junction on Deck 2 and open them." "You," she said to Ren. "The medical bay has emergency communication equipment. Can you get a signal out? If the power junction is restored, yes. Then wait for the lights." She turned to a group of Delvari workers. "You 4, go to the cargo bays and find anything heavy, sharp, or dense. Bring it back here." They stared at her. "Now," she said. They went. Ren watched her move down the corridor, pipe in hand, heading toward the station's lower decks where the environmental systems were failing and the air was barely breathable. He had treated humans before. He had read their species file. He thought he understood what they were. He was only now beginning to realize how wrong he had been. This was not a soft, emotional creature stumbling through a hostile galaxy. This was a Deathworld organism in its natural state, and its natural state was crisis. Everything else was just waiting. The section between Deck 2 and the power junction had lost pressure. Nora could feel it the moment she opened the access hatch. The air rushed past her toward the breach, hungry and fast, pulling heat from her skin and moisture from her eyes. Beyond the hatch, the corridor stretched 40 meters to the junction room. The emergency seals had failed on this section. The atmosphere was nearly gone. The others could not follow her. A Delvari would lose consciousness in 30 seconds. A Grethian would not last 10. Even the hardier species on the station could not survive more than a minute in near vacuum without protective gear. Nora did not have protective gear. She had lungs that could hold air for nearly 3 minutes. She had a cardiovascular system built by millions of years of evolution on a world where the atmosphere tried to kill you on a good day. And she had a childhood spent in the thin, toxic air of dust, where holding your breath was not a game, but a survival skill taught before children learned to read. She took 3 deep breaths, hyperventilating slightly to load her blood with oxygen. Then she sealed her lips, stepped through the hatch, and pulled it shut behind her. The cold hit her first. Without atmosphere to insulate, the temperature in the corridor had dropped to something close to freezing. Frost coated every surface. The metal floor burned through her boots. Her exposed skin tightened and her capillaries constricted, her body automatically redirecting blood to her core organs to keep them warm. She moved fast, not running, because running would burn oxygen she could not replace, but walking with a speed and purpose that ate up the distance. Her vision began to narrow at the edges as the pressure dropped, but she kept her eyes on the junction room door at the end of the corridor. 40 meters. 30. 20. Her chest began to ache. The air in her lungs was expanding as the pressure fell, pressing against her ribs from the inside. She controlled it, exhaling tiny amounts through pursed lips to equalize, a technique divers on Earth had used for centuries. 10 meters. 5. She reached the junction room, forced the manual door release, and stumbled inside. The room was sealed, still pressurized. She gasped, pulling in air that tasted like metal and oil, and gave herself exactly 10 seconds to recover before she started working. The power relay was a mess. The raiders had not just cut power. They had overloaded the main coupling, frying the connection between the station's backup generator and the distribution grid. It was not destroyed, but it would need to be manually reconnected, bypassing the burned-out coupling and routing through the secondary bus. Nora was not an engineer, but she had grown up fixing broken things with whatever was available because on dust, you fixed it yourself or you did without. She studied the relay, traced the connections, found the secondary bus, and began rerouting power using her hands, a borrowed multi-tool, and the kind of practical problem-solving that came from a lifetime of making things work when they should not. It took her 7 minutes. When she closed the final connection, the emergency power grid hummed to life. Lights flickered on across the station. Sealed doors unlocked. And in the medical bay, Ren saw his communication console light up. He did not waste time. He opened the station-wide channel and broadcast a message in every language the system carried. This is Medical Officer Ren. The station is not under full raider control. Emergency power has been restored. All personnel, resist and regroup. The message echoed through every corridor, every sealed room, every hidden corner of pale drift. And in the market hall, where Sava held over 300 hostages, it landed like a bomb. Sava's head snapped toward the nearest speaker. Her eyes narrowed. Someone had restored power. Someone had reached the junction room through a depressurized section. Someone was still fighting. Find them, she ordered. Find whoever did this and bring them to me. She sent a squad of 8. They moved through the newly lit corridors with weapons raised, scanning every room, every shaft, every shadow. They did not find Nora. Nora found them. She hit them in pairs, using the station's layout against them. She knew the corridors now, had memorized the schematic, and she used choke points, blind corners, and maintenance hatches to isolate and disable them 2 at a time. She never fought fair. Fair was a concept for species that had not evolved alongside predators that hunted in packs. She fought smart, she fought fast, and she fought with the absolute efficiency of a creature that understood on a bone-deep level that wasted energy meant death. Within 20 minutes, 8 raiders were down, some unconscious, some bound with their own equipment straps, none dead. Nora did not kill if she did not have to. That was also a human trait, one the galaxy had not yet learned to appreciate. She made her way toward the market hall, using the ventilation system to approach from above. Through the grating, she could see Sava pacing among the hostages. She counted the remaining raiders. 12. armed, alert, and angry. She also saw Galek, the Tor merchant. He was not sitting with the other hostages. He was standing near the raider line, speaking quietly to one of Sava's officers. His body language was wrong. Too comfortable. Too familiar. Nora filed that away. Then she saw something that made her blood turn cold. Two raiders were dragging a small, copper-furred shape into the market hall. DRI. They had found her. The child was limp with terror, her eyes squeezed shut, her small hands gripping the arm of the raider who held her. Sava looked at the child, then looked at her officers. Good, she said. Hostages are useful. Put her with the others. Nora's grip tightened on the pipe until her knuckles turned white. Her breathing did not change. Her heart rate did not spike. But something behind her eyes shifted, something old and deep and very, very dangerous. She began planning. She came through the ceiling. The ventilation grate above the market hall burst open and Nora dropped into the middle of 12 armed raiders like a stone falling into still water. She landed in a crouch, pipe in hand, and was moving before the first raider turned his head. The nearest guard took the pipe across the back of both knees and folded. The second got it across the jaw before he could raise his weapon. Nora moved between them like something fluid, never stopping, never planting her feet for longer than a heartbeat. She was not stronger than them. She was not bigger, but she was faster in the space between thoughts, the gap between seeing a threat and responding to it. And that gap was where humans had always lived. A million years of dodging predators, reading terrain, and making split-second decisions in a world that punished hesitation with death had made that gap their kingdom. 4 raiders went down in the first 10 seconds. The hostages erupted. Ren's broadcast had planted a seed, and now that seed cracked open. Delvari workers surged to their feet. Grethians threw their bulk against the nearest guards. Even a few Finn, tiny and terrified, threw whatever they could find. The market hall became chaos. Sava's remaining raiders tried to form a line. They were trained, disciplined, and armed. Under normal circumstances, they would have crushed the resistance in moments. But these were not normal circumstances. Their communications were down. Their reinforcements were unconscious in corridors throughout the station, and there was a human in the room who moved like the galaxy's worst nightmare. Nora took down 2 more in the chaos. Then 3 station workers, armed with metal bars from the cargo bays, handled another. The raider line broke. Aliens who had been cowering minutes ago were now fighting with the desperate energy of people who had been given permission to stop being afraid. And then Sava moved. The Korith captain had not joined the fighting. She had watched it with cold, calculating eyes, reading the situation the way a general reads a battlefield. She knew the fight was lost. Her crew was scattered, her operation ruined. But she was not finished. She grabbed DRI. The little Finn child screamed as Sava lifted her with one massive, scaled hand and pressed the barrel of her plasma rifle against the child's side. The sound cut through the chaos like a blade, and everything stopped. Every person in the hall froze. Every fight ended mid-swing. Every voice went silent. Sava's voice filled the space. The next creature that moves watches this child burn from the inside out. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Except Nora. She stepped forward. The pipe hung at her side. Her hands were empty of intent. She just walked one step after another, directly toward the Korith captain who held a weapon to a child's body. Stop, Sava said. Nora did not stop. Sava aimed past Nora and fired. The plasma bolt screamed through the air and burned across Nora's left shoulder, close enough to sear the fabric of her jacket and leave a line of blistered skin beneath. The smell of burned cloth filled the air. Nora did not flinch. She did not change speed. She did not break eye contact. She kept walking. Sava had raided 37 stations. She had faced armed security forces, military escorts, and desperate merchants willing to die for their cargo. She had never once felt what she felt now, looking into the eyes of this small, burned, unarmed human walking toward her. It was not courage. Sava understood courage. Courage was overcoming fear. This woman was not overcoming anything. There was no fear in her to overcome. There was only a fixed, absolute certainty that she was going to reach that child, And nothing in the universe, not pain, not weapons, not death, was going to change that. For the first time in her life, Sava hesitated. It lasted less than a second, but a second was all a Deathworlder needed. Nora closed the remaining distance in a single explosive step. Her left hand caught the barrel of the plasma rifle and shoved it sideways, away from DRI. Her right hand struck Sava's wrist at the nerve cluster where cord scales were thinnest. The weapon dropped. Nora caught DRI with one arm as the child fell, twisted, and swept Sava's legs out from under her with a low kick that used the Raider's own weight against her. Sava hit the floor. Nora's knee was on her chest, and the pipe was across her throat before she finished falling. The market hall was silent. Then the remaining Raiders dropped their weapons. It was over. In the hours that followed, the station slowly returned to something like order. The Raiders were bound and sealed in a cargo bay to await sector patrol. Palom emerged from hiding and attempted to take charge of the recovery effort, but no one listened to him. They listened to Ren, who organized medical triage with quiet efficiency, and to the Delvari workers who had fought alongside Nora. Galek did not get far. Nora told Ren what she had seen in Market Hall, the Torah merchant standing too close to the Raider line, talking too comfortably with Sava's officers. A search of his ship found the hidden transmitter and a record of every message he had sent. He was detained without a word. Ren found Nora sitting on the floor of the cargo bay, her back against a crate. DRI was curled in her lap, asleep, both small hands gripping Nora's jacket like she would never let go. Nora's shoulder was bandaged with medical tape she had applied herself. He sat down beside her and said nothing for a while. Then he asked the question that had been building in him since the moment she dropped through the ceiling. How did you do that? Walk toward her, knowing she could kill you. Nora looked down at DRI. The child's breathing was slow and deep. Safe. Where I come from, Nora said quietly. You learned something early. The thing that keeps you alive is not strength. It is deciding what matters more than being afraid. She stroked the fur between Durai's ears, and the child murmured in her sleep. She mattered more, Norris said. 1 week later, the Galactic Species Index entry on humans was updated. A new line appeared at the bottom of the behavioral notes section. It read, humans do not fight hardest for themselves. They fight hardest for those they have chosen to protect. Do not threaten what a human loves. There is no known force in the galaxy sufficient to stop them. Nora stayed on Pale Drift, not because she had to, not because her ship was repaired, not because anyone asked her to. She stayed because a small, copper-furred child with fox ears and 2 big eyes had reached up, taken her hand, and whispered, please do not go. And on a death world, when something small asks you to stay, you stay.